Welcome to the Microsoft Excel training. In today's video, we are going to be looking at how to use the Excel reference. We are going to look at the three references that we have: the absolute reference, the relative reference, and the mixed reference. The absolute reference means that you are locking your range. In the process of calculation or referencing, the range becomes absolute. It means it doesn't shift. In relative reference, you are maintaining the normal status quo, in which case cells are referenced relatively even in your calculation. Then the mixed reference is a situation where you are either locking the column or the row. Now let's go into the class and see how this is done. Okay, let us start with the relative reference. So relative reference, we're just going to use this example. Let me just explain this. So from this table, I have order ID, product, category, amount, quantity, total, date, and country. So the amount multiplied by quantity gives us the total. So now, if you look at this D2 multiplied by E2, you can see that the calculation is done relatively. So by the time I come downward here, we have D3 by E3, that is also relative. So you see that as we drag this formula downward, the calculation appears relatively. So let's say I copy this. So you see that it takes D3 to E3, it takes D4 to E4. So that is what we mean by relative reference. So it takes that relatively, okay? Next, we are going to look at the absolute reference. In absolute reference, you lock a particular cell or a range in calculation in such a way that the calculation refers to only the cell or the range. That means as you drag your formula downward or to whichever side you're dragging it, vertically or horizontally, the particular cell that is being referred to remains constant in the calculation, or in a situation whereby the cells you are is a range that you are referring to, then of course it also remains constant. So we're going to use an example of a VAT calculation, which refers to a single cell for our absolute reference. Okay, so now let's look at this. We want to calculate the VAT for all these. We have a single percentage value at the top. We want to multiply by each of these. And what it means is that this remains absolute, while all these will be added, relatively, multiplied by the same value. So now, equals this value multiplied by this value. So that gives me the VAT. But let's say I decide to copy this formula down. You see that I have a lot of errors. Why do I have that? Because this is moving relatively. At this point, it is this value multiplied by this text. That's what it's doing. So that is F4 multiplied by G2. It has shifted from G1 to G2. So it's not relative. So for absolute reference, we have to make this G1 to be absolute. So we make this G1 to be $G $1. So can you see that? So if I copy this formula downward, you see that G1 at every point is absolute. G1 at every point is absolute. So that is absolute reference. Next, we are going to look at the mixed reference. The mixed reference means that at a point in time, you lock the row or the column. So when you are performing a calculation that has to do with a cross-reference that requires you to take a section of a column or a section of a row, and in the process of copying your formula down, one of these sections have to be locked. Or maybe you are copying your formula to the right, then you have to lock the section to the column. If you are copying your formula downwards, you want to lock to the row. Now let's go into the class and see how this is done. For the mixed reference, we are going to use the SUMIFS function to explain how the mixed reference can be very useful. The SUMIFS function sums value using multiple criteria. If you want to learn more about SUMIFS, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel and check the video on SUMIFS. I have the details of how that is used and how to use that very well in the video. Now, so I'm going to sum range using my criteria, and of course, I have this particular table here, and I have this product table. So I want to sum ifs. The SUMIFS takes the following parameter. So you can see in the screen tips the sum range. So I'll provide the sum range. Then I'll provide the criteria range. Then I'll provide the criteria itself, which is the first criteria. And then I'll provide the second criteria range, which is country. And then I'll provide the criteria France. So now, as it is, the calculation has been done. Carotte from France has been added together. Now, if I decide to copy this formula downward, you will see that all other pattern and portion is showing 0 because the range is moving relatively. You can see that it has changed to M10 from M9. So the first value was M9. So because we left it relative, it's changed. It's changed to M10. If you check the one down here, it's changing to M15. So which means it's relatively moving. But we don't want to move. Don't want it to move relatively. We want to lock the row. We don't want to lock the column. So we will lock row 9. So that means we have locked it to row 9. But in case we have any reason to go to the right side, we are not locking the column. The column will remain where it is, but the row will change. So look at that. So we go down, and you can see that the calculation is now done because row 9 is locked. So that's how to do the mixed reference. Cell referencing in Excel helps you to avoid error. Applying the relative reference correctly, or the absolute reference, or even the mixed reference will make your calculation to go without any form of error. So it's important that we understand what references are for. So I'm glad that we've been able to look at these 3 references. See you in another session. Bye for now.